right. It's Wednesday. Sometimes sometimes I tell everybody, like my radio show, it's more exciting off the air than it is on the air. You know, I joke with Lindsay all the time. I used to have Democrats come on my show when I was really a no-name a while back, and my weekend numbers beat everybody that I went on daily and then big time now. And then I used to, some of the guests I used to have come on, Lindsay. By the way, Ed Dean, let me introduce everybody before I tell my story. Ed Dean, hello, everybody. Wednesday edition of the Florida Daily Show. I am the publisher of Florida Daily. Ed Dean, my co-host, Lindsay Randall. There were times, Lindsay, where my guests would literally leave the beach because I used to have a Sunday show. This is a long time ago. I used to have a Sunday show because I was a news reporter and then I was a talk show producer, but I was a news guy and I had my own radio show. They would literally get gassed up a little bit with a couple of boozes before they come on. Guess what? They watched their language. It was the best talk radio we ever had.
Wow. Maybe we should start doing that.
I had Democrats come on because it was always good to have in both sides whatsoever. So,
great idea. Anyway.
Well, what's going on with session? How many special flipping sessions are we going to have?
I don't know.
Is it? I mean,
3? Are we up to 3? 4?
Well, I don't know. We're going to talk about that with our panel discussion coming up in a couple of moments. How many redistricting? How's that going to look like? That's what looks like a cluster mess. I know the governor wants like 5. I love my governor. Good luck. I don't think that's going to happen. Number 2, the property tax. I think you can kiss that goodbye to what I would like to see, but nobody's talking about what are you going to replace it with. This is what we talked about on yesterday's Florida Daily Show. And what's going on with who knows? I mean, you know, we'll talk about the governor's race and all stuff down the road. All right, so we got a lot to talk about, Lindsay, and education. Who knows where this is going? Just stay tuned and we'll have some fun.
It'll be fun.
Yeah.
The day ends in Y, so you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So, all right, let's get to our panel discussion. Jennifer Green, president of Liberty Partners, LLC, who I plagiarize a lot off of. And then, I'm kidding, of Florida Daily. Then Matt Caldwell, who I think plagiarizes a lot off of me. Anyway, Matt Caldwell, former Florida State rep. He's one of those talk radio analysts. He's got one of these gigs like iHeart and all the other stuff. And then Jennifer Green, who comes on with us religiously on my statewide syndicated radio show. So, Jennifer, can I set this up? And Jennifer knows me well enough. So does Matt. I joke around, but every week, so every day at Florida Daily, we get certain press releases. We do our own investigations. We do a lot of Florida Daily investigative stories on our own. And every week, Jennifer sends out this. Now, Jennifer, do you just do it during session or do you do it outside of session as well? Your weekly newsletter?
Oh, it's every week.
Okay, every week. So every week, I look at what she does, and it does a good. She talks about Northwest Florida, by the way, which I think is the next. Hey, everybody's like, go west, young man. Everybody's going west to West Florida. All right, never mind. By the way, if you're from up north, ignore that, okay? So, please. Yeah, but that's funny. But Jennifer really puts out every week what's happening, what isn't happening, and the lack of happening. I want to get to the lack of happening. And we always can, we use a lot of her stuff at floridadaily.com. Jennifer, when somebody says, hey, there isn't a lot our elected officials are doing, that could be a good thing. Sometimes it can be a bad thing. Every week you keep saying, here's what's been talked about doing as far as bills. Here's what's happened. Where are we right now?
We have regular session scheduled to end Friday. So the 13th, 11:59 p.m. Nothing else has happened since to extend it, or candidly, one of the chambers could go home this week and just not come back. So unless something happens, we're done at 11:59 p.m. Friday. And then we're going to come back and come back and come back. My opinion.
3 of them.
I think 3. Extending session would be great, but they're nowhere near close. I mean, you'd have to extend it for another month, if you want to get things done. But It would be nice to have everything else die.
I want to get to a little inside baseball in a minute. You mentioned 3. The 3 special sessions cover what for the audience out here?
Well, first would absolutely be the budget. I mean, that's going to have to be first or last. State budget has to be completed. I mean, the only thing they have to do before June 30th, you're going to have the redistricting special session. The governor's already called that. And then property taxes, I don't think you can finish the state budget until you have a property tax discussion and vice versa. But Matt would know. He's much more intimately involved with what impact that has on, but not just local budgets, but our state budget as well.
Yeah, I want to get into this. So Jennifer, before I get to Matt, and Lindsay will jump in anytime as she always does. Matt, let me go with you first here, Jennifer. If you don't have to, a lot of things I don't say on my radio show that are inside baseball, just because for the overall view of the audience, they don't really care how the sausage is made. They just want to make sure they can sit at the table and be able to eat. Why isn't there a lot getting done? Is that good or bad?
Do you really want me to answer that?
Well,
it's a continuation of last session. And I think a lot has to do with a governor in his last term, the speaker and the president in their last year of their 2-year term as presiding officers, and a very, very animated president of the United States. I mean, all of that is a nice little powder keg for things not being normal in Florida. It really is.
Jennifer, I have a question for you. I heard that, I think I read somewhere that the budgets, the House and Senate versions, are $1.5 billion off. There's like somewhere around there?
I thought it was 3 or 4 billion, but you start getting into B's, it doesn't really matter.
It's a lot.
It's $1 billion off.
Right. So what's the biggest disconnect, do you think?
The House, and this is again comments from the speaker, the House is trying to cut spending, cut taxes. Let's put the taxes off to the side, because I think the Senate, they could come to agreement there. But there's as the speaker said, a philosophical difference between spending approaches between the House and Senate. And whether it comes down to small member projects, that's a big chunk of change. And so I would guess that in education and in healthcare, there are probably big pieces where they are far apart.
Yeah. Matt, let me bring you in. There is, Jennifer's right. I mean, she kind of gave you the 30,000-foot inside baseball which is fine. I'm not saying this as a put down without getting too deep. There's just a cluster mess. Usually if there's a Republican governor that is disliked, it's usually done by Democrats. Not this time. It's disliked by other Republicans out there. And again, if you want to get into the weeds, you go ahead. You don't have to. But this is just a cluster mess. Am I to say it's like the movie Mean Girls, one of my favorite movies, by the way. Just like you've got the plastics over here and the groups over here. Everybody's trying to, it seems like everybody's trying to have their own little group. It's like something you would see back in high school. Is that pretty much what you're seeing right now? Somebody wants to don't get what they want to, they're going to pout, and the stubbornness just kicks in.
Well, they're definitely not on the same page. I've got a couple of observations. I was there 2010 to 2018, so I served during the last year of the previous governor under Rick Scott. It was not as productive as the other 7 years. I think there is just a constant through line. And I recall listening to people talk about the last year with Charlie Crist back in 2010 before I got there. His personal issues aside, it's the end. When it's the end of a term for a governor for the executive branch, it changes the whole dynamic. And it's not unheard of. I mean, Jennifer alluded to the possibility that the House may just go home. I was there under Chris Foley when he was speaker. We could not come to terms, the House and the Senate, over Medicaid expansion. Barack Obama wanted to expand Medicaid. We were never going to do it. The House was not going to do it. The Senate didn't believe us, and we called their bluff and left on what would be Tuesday of the last week of session, and headed home and busted the session over it. And we had to come back to do a special to finish the budget. So it's not that it's unheard of, but I do think this is a particularly contentious moment. And there's so many other issues happening here. We've got supermajorities in both chambers. As Republicans, we've not experienced this level of control before, and that definitely changes the dynamic as well. The way people view how they negotiate changes when they've got supermajorities in both their chambers, and it's just kind of come together in a perfect storm, I think, this year.
All right, I'm going to start with you first, Matt. Then I'm going to go to Jennifer. Redistricting. There's going to be a, quote, special session for redistricting. Now, Matt, wow, we're going all over the map. No, map. Okay, Matt, but we're going to talk about going all over the map here. It was going to be picking up 1 seat. Then we hear it's 2. Then I've got other friends of mine telling, no, the governor wants to pick up 5 seats. mathematically, I don't see how that's going to happen. This is is this a cluster mess as well, Matt Caldwell?
Well, it potentially can be. We've got two things happening at the same time, and this really gets down in the weeds because redistricting is almost entirely shaped by litigation and case law. There's actually, when you get down to it, very little statutory or constitutional guardrails on it. But we do have a potential conflict between our state constitution, which the fair voting amendment that the Democratic Party got passed back in 2010, 2012, changed that cycle and prohibited specifically redistricting based on race and issues that they deemed as being unfair, let's just say.
Right.
What you've got happening in the case law at the federal level, the Supreme Court several years ago invalidated essentially the Voting Rights Act because the Voting Rights Act, and this is the liberals on the left will say, oh, the Supreme Court was partisan about this. No, the Voting Rights Act says that you have to demonstrate that there's racial inequality in the actual outcomes, and they had not updated the stats since the 1970 census. So they were still expecting people to draw maps, particularly in southern states that were enjoined by the Voting Rights Act, based on 1970s data. And the Supreme Court came back and said, no, you have to adopt 2010 data or 2020 data. Congress doesn't do it. And so you can't draw, you can't draw districts to benefit, to prevent racism, so to speak, and benefit a racial party if you can't demonstrate there's actual problems with it.
But okay, so this is where I got 5 questions to ask, and then Matt and Jennifer will talk, and the 5 questions I want to ask, I got to put that to the side because they said something. I got to follow up with this other stuff. Matt, I'll get to Jennifer. I promise, Jennifer, I'm going to give you plenty of time as you always get. I know. Matt, would somebody please, what in the world do they mean? Okay, a balance of racial inequality. Does that mean that 50% of a state house here in Florida or a state Senate, forget Congress, or you can even throw 50% has to be Black, Hispanic, or Jewish? I mean, because audience members, though, they're going to go, well, what do you mean racial equality? What is the percentage that they deem has to be included in a district?
Well, it gets judged by the court, and it really is like the definition of art. It depends on seeing. But what the record has to show is that the legislature in whatever state, wherever it is, has purposely drawn a district to prevent Black or Hispanic or whatever protected minority group from electing the person they would rather choose. Basically, they've gone through and split up a neighborhood in 8 different ways and prevented that neighborhood from deciding who they want to represent them. If they can't show that, if there's no record of that, and that's why the Voting Rights Act is basically a dead letter right now, because Congress hasn't updated the stats in 50 years.
But hold on.
Then there's no standard to draw to.
But hold on. But you get my question. Like, okay, you got a lot of cities where, yes, there are all sorts of groups that live in those cities. You can divvy it up on certain maybe districts, but many of these rural counties, in some areas, there isn't enough certain groups of one group to average it out. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's what I'm saying. How do they do it? If there isn't enough certain groups in the Black community or Hispanic community that you could sit back and say, well, because then the question is, how much percentage do you include them in a district when there isn't that many that may not even live in the district then? You get what I'm saying?
Well, I do. And I think that's part of why Congress hasn't updated the stats, because particularly they didn't when the Democrats had the majority when this case came down about 10 years ago, because they recognize that the stats aren't going to hold up anymore. Right. You've got Black and Hispanic voters that don't affiliate themselves with the Democratic Party. They're crossing the aisle, so to speak. It has changed, it's evolved partisan affiliation over the last 50 years. So you can't look at something and say, oh, because this neighborhood didn't elect a Democrat, then let's just do a 1970s perspective, then clearly the Republicans were trying to keep them away from it. But that you can't show that in the data anymore, which is why they've run away from this.
Now, Jennifer Green, now we're going down another rabbit hole here. If you would say, yeah, this might have been an argument in the 50s and 60s, hey, fine. Now, when you've had the first Black president, you've had many of those in white communities represent Black communities. By the way, Black mayors like Jacksonville have represented predominantly white communities. This whole argument about the voting rights, this and that, Matt's exactly right, needs to be updated. You would think, based on the surface, that these type of, quote, statistics would no longer be needed. We're in 2026. I mean, I know a lot of those in the white community that will vote for an individual who's black based on not on their skin color, but based because whether you agree, differ with whatever your views may be, it's the marketplace of ideas here. I mean, do we still need more of these stats to draw up these lines anymore?
Well, I think absent a U.S. Supreme Court decision, as Matt was talking about, yes. The question is, what are the stats that you need? And think about this. We're not talking about a population. We're not talking about residents in a particular House district. We're talking about registered voters in a House district.
Right.
We're also making assumptions that those registered voters vote. Florida doesn't have a runoff. We have a primary, which is partisan. We have a general election. There can be people that don't vote in the primary, that vote in the general, who are Republicans and Democrats. I mean, there's all these scenarios that an outcome of a particular race could be based on, and it's not about where the lines are drawn. It truly isn't. It's about voter behavior. And one of the things we're seeing is that 30% of no party affiliation, or we'll just call them the people who don't want to identify as a Republican or Democrat, it's growing. It is growing. And that should tell us something. It should tell us people are not happy so far right or far left.
Do you think that's going to continue that trend, Jennifer?
I do. I think we've seen it the last couple election cycles. And I think it's going to be worse after this election cycle because it seems like people are throwing their hands up. And I don't know that it's new voters or it's current voters, switching parties. But when you're getting to where it's like a 30-30-30, you're close to that statewide, but you're seeing something that isn't an insignificant 5% of those that are voting, identifying with one party. But it's getting bigger, and there's individual districts where. And I think it's down in Orlando, Central Florida somewhere. But the independent, no party affiliation registration is bigger than the second of the two.
Right.
Parties. So
wow.
That's terrifying.
Huge.
It really is, because we have, again, a primary system that does not jive with the primary system.
Do you know about other states too? I mean, is this a trend across the country, or really is this focused more on Florida?
I never want to compare any other state to Florida.
That's right.
I don't know the answer to it. My guess would be we're probably seeing more people who are first-time voters not registering partisan. So, or people moving to Florida, to the U.S. that are not registering partisan.
Let me say this, and that's a great question, Lindsay. The growing amount, what Jennifer was talking about, MPAs. Let me just say this. This is not a dig. I know the Democrats are loving some of the election results, what's been happening nationwide, Jennifer, also what happened down in Miami-Dade. First Democrat in almost 30 years wins down there. Of course, there are 15 people in that race, but it is what it is. They got a victory and everything else. This is not to put as a slam against the Republican Party of Florida, but we've talked to several supervisors of election, Jennifer. And hey, where are all these numbers coming from? The Republicans, by the way, Jennifer brings up a very valid point. Don't forget the NPAs. And we all seem to do that, Jennifer. It's reps versus Dems. But one of the reasons why that there's a big spread is because of how well this state has done, starting with the COVID, keeping, for the most part, I know we had a little hiccup, but for the most part, keeping the economy open. And then people moving to the state of Florida. And one of the reasons why there is a big spread between Republicans and Democrats isn't because my party's the greatest at voter outreach. Local municipalities have done a good job. It's because when they have to do their driver's license, there's a thing called motor voter. And when they go get their driver's license done, most of these people are conservative. They're Republicans. They don't like the way the Democrats ran these states during COVID. They're switching parties, or they're taking what they were. I'm a Republican in New York. I'm coming down to Florida. So when they get their driver's license renewals, because they have to by law, hey, sir or ma'am, are you registered to vote? Yes, I want to vote Republican. That's one of the big reasons why those numbers have gone up. Now, Jennifer, here's the question. Let's have a little fun here. Is there an issue, and I think you know this because you've represented them, Lindsay's an expert on this issue of school choice. If there is an issue, I believe Democrats would agree maybe with some of us conservatives on, is the issue of school choice. We've seen more of that. They can't publicly say it, but
right.
Constituency. Then where is there an issue where may have not been Republicans, maybe it's the environment or conservationism. If school choice can bring Democrats over, what is an issue that maybe Republicans haven't supported that's maybe going them a little bit more to the middle on? That's a trick question.
Very trick question. I think it would have to be something to do, and I'm not going to just say property tax, something to do with taxes, because everybody pays taxes. So if it's dropping the statewide sales tax rate, or having an increase, like Save Our Homes was something. Think about it. We have Save Our Homes. We have 3% cap when you live somewhere. We have portability. I mean, those are things, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, if you buy a new home and your property taxes don't go through the roof, that's a really good thing. I mean, you can't argue against that. So I think something like a sales tax or a property tax that would affect everybody. You wouldn't have an option, especially, again, those people who don't have kids, they don't care about school choice. They really.
Yeah. I got to tell you something, Matt. Lindsay, Jennifer and Matt come on my radio show daily. And Matt, every year at Florida Daily, I do a story. We have reporters, but I do the story and this is what I understand. Again, I am for somebody that can win on the issue, the marketplace. As a free market conservative, I don't always agree with everything President Trump does, but there's a lot of things I do agree with what President Trump has done. All right. When he starts going down the path of capping interest rates on credit cards and stopping Wall Street investors, that's something that Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren want. I don't subscribe to that. But when you talk about as Jennifer talked about tax cuts and things, that is something that resonates with a lot of voters. What I have found interesting as we move around on these issues is so much, if we go back to the partisan label, for example, I can go to your neck of the woods, Matt, Collier and Lee County, very conservative. Okay. St. Johns County, oh my gosh, Ponte Vedra, very conservative. Maybe like Lake, or maybe give me another conservative one. Ocala, Marion County. And what I find interesting, Matt, is that Republicans have never liked school unions. You know where I'm going with this, Matt? And yet I've known Marion County, I'll give you an example. St. Johns County, just south of Jacksonville, where St. Augustine is, 65% pro-Trump, 65% pro-DeSantis in their votes. In the same year, 67% and there's Republicans, because there's not enough Democrats, are all voting for a flipping tax increase that has been endorsed by the school unions. And I'm sitting here going, what's going on? And then we find out that some of the Democrats in Orange County and South Florida talking about maybe we shouldn't be raising so much on the property tax. Maybe we shouldn't vote for the, quote, mobility sales tax increase. Matt, it's like role reversal going on in some of these parties that you would have never seen Republicans support tax increases a few years ago, especially for the children.
Yeah, no, the trend towards increased taxes in what would traditionally be conservative counties that you would expect would never vote for it has really been astounding. I mean, we had it here in Lee County back in 2018. It barely passed 51-49 to add a half-cent sales tax. And just as those of us that opposed it predicted, a good chunk of that money just went to salaries of the administration. They got scandalized for it, the immediate budget after that. There's almost never a situation I've seen where these tax increases actually result in any noticeable difference in the performance of the schools themselves.
Great point.
What matters is parental involvement. What matters is rewarding the teachers who understand and are committed to the actual goal of educating children, not just cashing a paycheck every single week. If you can capture the magic in the bottle of having real teachers and committed parents, that's going to result in educational outcomes. Whether they meet in an empty field or in the fanciest Taj Mahal in the world isn't going to make a difference at the end of the day. It's what is the involvement level, and the money isn't going to solve that. It's just going to go to line somebody's pocket 9 times out of 10.
So I got to talk about something. Matt Caldwell did a phenomenal article. We covered what might have been last summer, Matt, on the issue of property taxes. And let me tell you something. I mean, I could talk about this all day. I'm going to get Jennifer in here. We had a great discussion at one of our Tallahassee affiliates at 93.3. We were over there during the holidays. And man, Jennifer's great. I say this because Jennifer's a dear friend. You talk about property taxes and your levels here. When we were having this on the air, my radio show, Jennifer's level, it was like up here. I'll get to this in a second. But Matt wrote we covered it at Florida Daily. Matt was talking about, Jennifer, that you can't talk about quote, property tax exemptions or property tax cuts unless you address the school portion of the sales tax. And Jennifer brings up a very valid point where, because you have, if I may say, Jennifer, because I know you're all over TV and stuff as well, you have, what's the word? Clients or whatever, west of Tallahassee. You've got relationships. I don't tell everybody everything, Jennifer. I'm just saying you've got relationships with clients west of Tallahassee where the property tax, I think if you looked at it posed well, especially in Southeast Florida, Southwest Florida, where it's just going through the roof, but in Northwest Florida where, okay, Destin, some of the other areas, there isn't a lot of revenue that comes in, and I don't see the support for the property tax, quote, elimination, but by the way, are they all for property tax exemptions? I mean, Jennifer's like, hey, it may be popular here, but it ain't popular up here. I remember having that debate over the holidays.
It's just the mechanics of it. I mean, one of the counties, and I think it was a House member that actually represents them, but Holmes County was a great example. One of the ideas was to move the homestead exemption up to $500,000. And it would have basically, there were like a handful, maybe 5 properties in the entire county that would pay property taxes. Those are poor areas. And again, that's a very different situation and a very conservative area where increasing some other tax locally is not what that elected body is going to do. They have high voter registration. They're Republicans. They are high Ron DeSantis supporters. So their option is it's really coming down to math, saying, okay, well, if you do this, here's what it's going to do, and how are we going to run our county? And it's not give us money. It's not we need to backfill, which has been talked about. I think it's more so the how do we survive without it? What's the alternative that doesn't increase something else on residents in the county? Because all you're doing is moving it from one place to another, candidly.
Lindsay and myself were talking about this yesterday, that you could look at UNF, Florida National University, let's say James Madison Institute. Remember this, Lindsay? We talked about this on yesterday's show. How is it that we're talking not even 5-6 months ago, JMI had a poll, and where even including Democrats, you got Republicans, independents, and Democrats, 60%. We're not talking about tax reform. We're talking about elimination of property tax, past the threshold. Now their latest polling number, 35%. Remember that, Lindsay?
Mm-hmm.
Because
it's dropped.
What's that?
I said it's dropped off. It's completely dropped off. And
nobody seems to talk about what are you going to replace it with? At least
right.
which unfortunately never going to happen. I wish we could replace the federal income tax. Tariffs isn't going to do it. But at least replace it with a flat tax, Lindsay, or a sales tax. And I think this is just my view, and I'll get all y'all's take on this one. Lindsay and I were talking about this yesterday. How in the world do you drop off by nearly 30%? They haven't run any ads. The only thing that's been talked about, it's on our radio show. We covered it Florida Daily, how the governor, I don't know still what his proposal is. And yet, Lindsay, it's like nobody's replaced. I think even if you excluded fire and police, still the majority of voters in the state of Florida say we want property tax reform, just not elimination of property taxes.
Yeah, I think part of the problem has been there hasn't been a specific plan that was laid out from the very beginning. And I think it's been confusing, and I think voters are tired of hearing it with no plan. And I think that just frustrates people. And so I think that's part of the reason why this drop has happened, because I think it is a winning issue for our side, or it could have been, but I think it was really mishandled. Yeah, Jennifer, it continues to be.
That's why I was like, I like what Blaze wants to go with down the path of cutting government spending. But I've always told this 1,000 times, Jennifer. I said, what's one man's treasure is another man's trash, or woman's, whatever. So anyways, in today's world, so that's the pronouns. But having said this, Jennifer, like I get Republicans that listen to my radio show. And I'm like, do you really need any more new libraries? I didn't have complaints against parks more than anybody else. Democrats. I've had Democrats going, Ed, I don't like your views, but I do agree with some of your stuff. And they will tell you, we got enough flipping parks. We don't even use the parks we have now. But Jennifer, I got Republicans that go, no, we need to keep this chair. No, we got to keep more libraries around. I got to keep funding NPR locally. What I may deem as wasteful spending, I think it's in the eye of the beholder in many local areas here, Jennifer.
It is. And let's go back to the fact that none of these records and none of the discussions and no county's budget or city's budget is done in the dark. It's all public. So shame on you if you're a voter and you don't go to a city council meeting once a year or a county commission meeting. Vote them out. I mean, we're struggling here in Leon County. I'm going to say it. A conservative Republican who's been here since 92. We finally have a Republican actually representing us, and that's Corey Simon. We have a city within a county, one city within a county. And the problem is our voter registration is so far left. We don't have anything we can, do with it. But if you're complaining about something, or if you have an issue and you're talking about spending of your local government, again, get the information. You do start digging down on things. I'll give the CFO credit. A lot of it was just really funny. The things that he was throwing out there of, what was paid for. And look, it could have been the time of year. It could have been something that was doubled up from a previous year. Doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, everybody complains about spending until they hit a pothole or until or the fire department doesn't come. That's on the property tax side of things. I want the police to come to my house. I want the fire department to come to my house. I want them to go to my neighbor's house. So if that's what it's being used for, that I think is something people can swallow and not be concerned about.
Matt, she brings up a good point. Is this now where, since the conversation of elimination of property taxes, we kept telling everybody it's just not happening, okay? Because it's going to have to be funded by non-homesteads, it's going to be funded by businesses. Matt, is the argument what Jennifer just said? Is that where it should be left, is by saying, listen, you don't like them, and I like that attitude. You get them to flip out of office, you kick them out whatsoever, because then the problem, I've been hearing this for 20 years as a reporter here in Florida, is, and I've heard this a lot from my party, the Republicans, and some of it's valid, the local municipalities have become a little bit more liberal. They can't get their act together. So that's why the state needs to come in and push this. Now you got, this is here, this is there. Where should it be, Matt?
Well, certainly there is a role for the state, right? The local government doesn't exist except for the legislature creates them and does set the rules. For example, you have a limit of 10 mills that you can levy as a city or a county. And you see counties and cities that have used that and others that are responsible. Lee County, for example, is at like 3.7, not to make you jealous, Jennifer, but I think we have one of the lowest millage rates for an urban county in the state. And that's all because of who we elected, right? It's we've put them in charge and told them we don't want to waste a bunch of money. And so the legislature can push on what the boundaries are, what's appropriate. I think there's a big conversation to be had. It gets a lot into the weeds, but you go back, a lot of this starts in the 1970s after the new Constitution in 68, where cities and counties were given unlimited authority and given the same authority. So without getting into how you solve it, you've got a huge duplication of responsibility between the cities and the counties in their statutory construction. They're allowed to do the same thing, and you get just the waste right there would solve a lot of it. But I don't want to leave the schools behind, because the truth about these property taxes really is the schools. The school tax line is not subject to the second homestead. It's not subject to the 10% cap. All these proposals continue to exempt them from being subject to any of those caps. So it's grown that just the required local effort, it's about 30% of every homestead tax bill. It's about 50%. That one line is half of the tax bill for your apartment building owner or your folks that have a Wendy's or a McDonald's franchise. Half of their property tax bill is going to just do K-12 education.
But Jennifer, Matt brings up some interesting points here, but to county governments, I've heard this complaint. I remember when the Great Recession hit in 2008 and 2009, we got to cut spending. Oh, really? That's a bad thing. But the argument was from government, county government, city government, and school districts. But Matt that's another topic. That whole school boards ought to be doged left and right. But Jennifer, the arguments from Republicans or Democrats that ran these government entities was, the state puts certain mandates on how we can spend the money. Like a federal budget, you got discretionary and then you got non-discretionary. It gives them an excuse. We can't spend it here because we got to spend it here on entitlements and all that kind of stuff. Is that a valid excuse when you get an elected official, Jennifer? They say, on a local level, the state puts mandates. They restrict us in spending things here. Why don't we just give I understand there's got to be a little bit of portion there. I get it. Is the attitude maybe let the cities and counties do it? You jack up the taxes and people aren't happy, they kick you out. You do something with the budget, they keep you in. Is that the way we should go?
No, I think the legislature has been wise, especially in the last 2 decades, in putting some, and I'm not going to say handcuffs, just like slapping some hands of local governments who've just gone bananas. Preemptions. They jump up and down about home rule, and we should have the ability. Well, let's talk about tourist development taxes. That's an issue the legislature has previously said, let's use that money for something else. Okay,
right.
Collecting it for one thing, you can't use it for something else. But you have counties that have like $1 million, $2 million, however the amount of money they have in their TDT accounts. And you know what they could do instead of whining that they can't spend it on what you're supposed to spend it on, or drop the sales tax rate. You're collecting too much. So it's about budgeting, and I really
Jennifer, hold on. But Jennifer, to conservatives, if you did something about the property taxes, some of the local governments have talked about eliminating their tourist development groups out there, which is, let's be honest, some of these are pretty bloated government entities. Goes back to the county, but then again, doesn't do anything about the amount of money. You just get rid of certain government entities, but the county would oversee most of that amount of money coming in instead of doling it out to tourist development or economic development.
It's a paper tiger. I think on that issue. Okay, you're going to get rid of your TDC or your CRA, or pick the quasi-governmental entity, and that local government can go, look, we shrunk government. It's garbage. They have a exercise every single year on their budget, and if you want to really have fun and see how bad things are in Florida, sometimes go to the Auditor General's website, Florida Auditor General's website, and look up. There's a place where you can look at every city and county's audit. You're going to see a lot of holes. There are local governments, they're required by law to turn their budgets in, or turn their audits in, their annual financial audit. They all have to the state of Florida. Do you know how many times, and they're not little itty bitty cities that just thumb their nose, they don't turn it in. And the state gets to do nothing because there's no teeth. It's a great example. And so what do? They go, okay, the only thing you can do is just not give me state money. We don't care. We're going to do whatever the heck we want to. So local governments that whine about not having control, again, I think is a major paper tiger.
That's an interesting point. I know because of COVID and the amount of spending was going on. I know some of these you're right. Some of these big cities were 15 months. 20 months, not getting some of their stuff done. So it's just quite interesting. And let me tell you something, Matt, if you want to really go, if I may add to what, I can't touch what Jennifer said, but if I can add a little bit, find out how much, well, let me put it this way. Find out what the health meaning of your tax dollars and your health finances of your local city, county government are, where, for example, if you can bond out a brand new sports stadium whatsoever, and you can't because it shows you're well over leverage. We did the story at Florida Daily, I think about a year or so ago, like Jacksonville, I think was the worst. You know how, Matt, you ever seen this where this is your share of the national debt? You seen that, Matt? Yep. Well, I think in some cities were just a little bit better. I think Jacksonville was the worst. That the average, I don't know if it was the taxpayer we did like a year and a half ago, the average family or taxpayer was $11,000 just to afford to just to get a level of their debt for their fire and police pension, because they keep raising taxes and it's still in a black hole out there. So and that's what I'm saying. If your finances where you can't bond anything out anymore, that's pretty, and I'm not advocating you do that, but you get what I'm saying, Matt. No,
well, there is a point where you get to be so fiscally unsound that drastic measures have to be taken. I love Jennifer's last point about not even complying with the audits. One idea I pushed, I couldn't get across the line when I was there, was prohibiting them from being able to borrow if they didn't comply. And I wanted to see every city and county record their charter with the Secretary of State, so you could have a single place to go find what the rules are, because just getting an answer to what all of the issues around the incorporation of a town or a special district or whatnot, if you prohibit them from borrowing money if they've not filed their charter and filed their CAFR, their comprehensive annual financial report, the bond underwriters will not lend them money. The bond underwriters will make sure that this gets complied with, because they aren't going to be on the hook to potentially not get paid back because the city or county or the special district didn't do what's required. So you just got to put incentives on it and make sure it gets tied up. And that's going to come across with this issue you're talking about, particularly with the big cities that are way, way over leveraged. When you sit down and figure out what their real liability is for their pensions, there's no question they are going to have to come to terms with the fact that their independent police and fire and general pensions have to be closed. They have to roll them up into the FRS. And what that's going to mean is they're going to have a pretty big bill to pay to make it whole, what they owe. But at least then the pensioners are going to be able to be guaranteed to get a benefit at the end of the day.
Why not leave it to local level, Matt?
We saw in the collapse that there were cities around the country that just went bankrupt, and the pensioners that had worked for those cities never got anything because nobody took this seriously.
That's another discussion. I think, you know what, Matt? I think we ought to allow state governments or we ought to allow city councils to have more riskier investments. Better return, right?
Well, it just all depends on the analysis.
Don't Jennifer, say that out loud.
Oh my gosh.
Jennifer, go multiple places.
Jennifer, I've got cities, man, we could do this. We're going to do it another one. Well, I could do this for another hour. Jennifer, I literally have cities I've covered in Florida where they put up at the end of the year, their finances online. And they brag about getting 2 to 3% rate of return on their investment. Oh, and then on page 15, but we put 5 to 6% in the pension. And I'm just, that's another issue for another time. So, but I know I'm just telling you, I'm just saying is if inflation is at here and my rate of return is here, I'm just saying some things I don't mind.
It doesn't add up.
Matt, I have a question. Is there any appetite for this in Tallahassee to make a real change? Or is it just an issue where everybody's just going to they're just doing this because it's too hard to fix, so they just don't want to tackle it?
It's not been on the forefront. I mean, the pension thing was so focused on during my time because we were coming out of the Great Recession, and we did a lot of major pension reform. Jennifer and Ed are going to recall we had some huge battles in 2012 and 14. I dealt with the Jacksonville issue. We allowed them to convert their half-cent sales tax specifically to pay their pension debt, but they had to close the pension side and only offer contribution accounts to the new hires. That was our requirement on the legislative side to give them that flexibility. It isn't top of mind right now. The other conversations are pushing forward. I do think there is a possible route for the property tax issue, but it's going to take the governor stepping in and giving some hard details. What does he want to do? And the truth is what he's talked about isn't going to pass the legislature, and it's definitely not going to get 60% on the ballot. So that's really the gap here. When and if he wants to see it happen, he's going to put four corners around it and say, this is what we really want to do. And he's the one that could get them to do it at the end of the day.
Jennifer, we haven't seen anything from the governor, have we?
No, it sounds good, but we really haven't seen concrete. We've seen a plan from the House. We haven't really seen anything from the Senate. When people say, what's going on with property tax? It provides some context, okay? If we're talking about reducing property taxes, one thing. Yep. If we're talking about eliminating property taxes, a whole nother issue. I mean, if I'm a renter, I don't really care what you do with property taxes because I don't pay it, and there's no guarantee that the owner of the property that I rent is going to pass on the savings on their property tax to me in the form of less, rent.
I'm with you. Well, listen, I got to let these two go because if not, they will conspire behind my back to take over this and my radio show and everything else as well. But Matt Caldwell comes on with us every week on Wednesdays, and then Jennifer comes on whenever she wants. She just calls him and says, "Hey, I want Friday." No, I want
hardly.
I know. Jennifer has.
Ed drags me on, and it's
no. I love having. Dude, let me tell you something.
The 7 a.m. or 7:30 a.m.
Let me tell you something. I've told this before, man. Jen knows how to get. I mean, I've told the story 1,000 times, Matt. Remember, it was 2023. Jennifer, Matt had just come on with us at the 1 hour, and then Jennifer was like the day before. I'll never forget it because I can remember when phones have blown up on the radio show. Like Matt, when you voted against the gun control bill in 2018 for 3 months straight, it was like Republicans were so pissed off at everybody. And I mean, I can remember like heated times, and I'll never forget Jennifer came on and talked about an HOA and how they weren't going to allow a certain American flag. And then people, the hate, there were F-bombs and the hate mails. And, it went against Jennifer. Jennifer just struck a chord. We took a boatload of calls. People like, that Jennifer, she's right, man. My OMG, I've never forgotten that because it was on the 4th of July. Remember that, Jennifer?
Yeah. And it was about all the different, the statute had all the enumerated flags. And I think it was, Matt, first responders.
Right.
If there wasn't a provision, somebody wanted to put like a flag up for firefighters and their homeowners association. Oh, you can't do that. People lost their minds.
Yeah. And Jennifer just reported on it. Oh my word. It was HOAs get people ticked off. So let's talk about it. So Jennifer Green, Liberty Partners, LLC, and always enjoy getting their stuff, and Matt Caldwell. So, all right, Jennifer, Matt, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you all.
See you, Ed.
Love it.
All right.
Bye.
See you, Lindsay. See you, Ed.
And me and Lindsay, I will tell you this. Jennifer's a ball of fire. And Matt's just cool.
Both of them are amazing.
Yeah.
Super smart people.
Jennifer is.
Glad they're on our side.
I know. Oh, yeah. Jennifer, when she brought up the whole thing of the HOA, I've said this on my radio show every day. By the way, we're going to be putting all this up for many of you that want to catch the statewide radio show, which is very fast paced. There are few issues where I know you can I've always said this many times on my radio show. You could have a town hall talk about affordability, taxes, Iran, gas price, whatever. And then somebody's asking a question over here, and that question dominates the rest of the other conversation that you originally were there for. And I will tell you, we've covered this at Florida Daily, and some of our biggest issues are scams. We talk taxes, who's running for what. But when you talk about, when you've done polling on homeowners association, everybody hates theirs.
They do.
But they don't want to get rid of it. Go figure.
They don't want to get rid of it. And the people that join the boards are typically people that they have like a power trip.
Yeah.
They get this tiny little ounce of power and they're like, oh my goodness, I am king or queen, and it's a disaster.
And then the guy or gal that wants to revamp how it's done by saying, well, if we're not happy with it, what can we do to get out of it? And that doesn't pass. Now you're known as the black sheep of the whole neighborhood association. Right. You're screwed.
And you got to move. You got to get out.
Exactly. And then the other story within an HOA that pisses everybody off is we did a story. What is the biggest complaints from neighbors about their neighbors that they complain to an HOA about? Oh, we did stories. I mean, it was
gosh.
So you can read about Florida Daily on Facebook. We have our own Facebook page at facebook.com, Florida Daily.
I think it's the definition of first world problems, Ed. I'm like, there are actual problems in this world. Let's not worry about like somebody's type of fence that they have up. Yeah. I mean, it's absurd. Or the exact shade of blue that they can have on their house. I don't live in an HOA. Praise God, because I couldn't deal with that.
You on 20 acres, you ain't got to worry about your own HOA. So anyway, you and everybody else. But
I have my own HOA for my family, just fine.
Yeah. So, well, listen, we're going to have another edition coming up tomorrow on Thursday. And so we'll get it all ready to go. Lindsay Randall, as always, good to see you. And then we'll get it tomorrow. Fun. Florida Daily Show. By the way, read everything at floridadaily.com. That's floridadaily.com.